World War I marked a turning point in human history. It was not only the first truly global conflict, but also the first war driven by industrial technology on an unprecedented scale. When the war began in 1914, military leaders believed it would be short. Instead, it became a brutal stalemate of trenches stretching across Europe. Faced with deadlock and massive casualties, nations turned to experimentation. World War I became a laboratory of war. Engineers, scientists, and military planners raced to develop new weapons capable of breaking the stalemate. Some of these experimental weapons reshaped warfare forever. Others proved too dangerous, unreliable, or controversial to continue. One of the most infamous experimental weapons of World War I was chemical gas. Poison gas was first used on a large scale in 1915. Initially, chlorine gas was released from canisters and allowed to drift toward enemy trenches. The gas attacked the lungs, causing panic, suffocation, and death. Later, more deadly agents were developed. Phosgene was more lethal and harder to detect. Mustard gas caused severe chemical burns and blindness, lingering in the soil long after an attack. Chemical weapons were unpredictable. Changes in wind direction could send gas back toward the troops who deployed it. Gas masks reduced casualties, but never eliminated the fear. Although chemical weapons failed to produce decisive victories, they introduced a new level of psychological terror to warfare. Their legacy would influence international law for decades. Another experimental weapon emerged directly from trench warfare, the flamethrower. First used by German forces in 1915, flamethrowers were designed to clear enemy trenches and bunkers. They projected burning fuel over short distances, forcing soldiers to flee or surrender. Flamethrowers were terrifying weapons, but they were also extremely dangerous to operate. The soldiers carrying them became priority targets, and a single bullet could ignite the fuel tanks. Despite their limited range and risk, flamethrowers demonstrated how close-quarters combat was evolving in the trenches. Perhaps the most revolutionary experimental weapon of World War I was the tank. Early in the war, armies needed a way to cross barbed wire, trenches, and machine gun fire. The solution came in the form of armored, tracked vehicles. The first tanks were slow, unreliable, and mechanically fragile. British Mark I tanks introduced in 1916 often broke down before reaching the battlefield. Yet even in their flawed form, tanks represented a breakthrough. They could cross trenches, crush obstacles, and provide mobile firepower. As the war progressed, tank design improved. Armor became stronger, engines more reliable, and tactics more effective. The tank would go on to dominate warfare in the decades that followed. Machine guns themselves were not new, but their experimental deployment changed warfare dramatically. Early expectations underestimated their impact. Once deployed defensively, machine guns made frontal assaults nearly suicidal. To counter this, militaries experimented with lighter machine guns, portable mounts, and new firing techniques. These innovations laid the foundation for modern infantry tactics. Artillery also underwent rapid experimentation. World War I saw the development of trench mortars, heavy howitzers, and long-range bombardment techniques. Weapons such as the German Paris gun were designed to strike targets far behind enemy lines. Accuracy was limited, but psychological impact was enormous. Civilians far from the front lines suddenly found themselves under fire. Artillery became the primary cause of casualties in the war, proving that indirect fire could be more deadly than direct combat. In the skies, aviation was still in its infancy. At the start of the war, aircraft were used mainly for reconnaissance. Soon, pilots began experimenting with mounted weapons. The challenge was firing a machine gun without hitting the propeller. Various experimental solutions were tested until synchronization gears allowed guns to fire through the propeller arc. This innovation transformed aircraft into fighters. Bombers soon followed. Though primitive and inaccurate, early bombing raids marked the beginning of aerial warfare. The war also saw experiments in naval weaponry. Submarines or U-boats became a major threat to shipping lanes. Germany experimented with unrestricted submarine warfare, targeting military and civilian vessels alike. This strategy aimed to starve enemies of supplies, but also drew new nations into the conflict, including the United States. Anti-submarine weapons, such as depth charges and sonar prototypes, emerged as countermeasures. On land, experimental personal weapons were tested. Trench clubs, grenade launchers, and improvised weapons became common. Soldiers adapted to the confined, brutal environment with whatever tools were available. Some experimental weapons were abandoned quickly. Others evolved into standard military equipment. World War I proved that technology could change warfare faster than strategy could adapt. By 1918, the battlefield had been transformed. What began as a war of rifles and cavalry ended with tanks, gas masks, aircraft, and mechanized firepower. The cost was enormous. Millions were killed, wounded, or permanently scarred by experimental weapons that had never been tested at such scale before. After the war ended in 1918, the world attempted to limit the use of certain weapons. Treaties were signed to restrict chemical warfare. But the lessons of World War I were not forgotten by military planners. Many experimental weapons developed during the war became the foundations of modern warfare. Others served as warnings about the dangers of unchecked technological escalation. World War I was not just a war of nations. It was a war of ideas, experiments, and consequences. The weapons tested during those years reshaped the future of conflict and the world itself.